Hello, grade sixes. So today we're just going to be going over percents a little bit more and how to calculate percents. If you've been following along so far, it actually is a lot of it is very similar to what we've done before. The big thing we need to remember is that a percent, right, is made of two parts, all right? Per and cent, which basically means per 100, right? Because cent, well, it is French, but it's French for 100, right? So when we write out something like 50%, what that means is there's 50 of something per 100 somethings, right? So maybe you have 100 apples and 50 of the apples are bad, right? 50 apples of the 100 entire apples are bad, so 50% are bad, right? Or maybe you have 100 rice, right? And 50 of the 100 rice, 50 of the 100 rice fell on the floor. Then 50% is on the floor, right? And that's kind of how we have to think about that. So 50%, if it's per 100, another way of writing that is 50 divided by or over 100, right? Because that's really what a fraction is. Remember, a numerator is how many pieces we have, right? Or how many pieces are affected, and a numerator is a denominator is how many pieces there are total. So there's 100 total rice, there's 100 total apples, and then 50 of them something happened, right? Maybe 50 of them are shaded, 50 of them are bad, 50 of them are on the floor, okay? Remember, this is our total. This is kind of the number that's affected. So 50%, 50 over 100, all right? So if I say to find 50% of, let's say, 20, that's a good one, of 20, what we have to do first is we're going to write this out as 50 over 100 equals, of 20. All right. What we need to do now is we need to rewrite this in almost like a formula, right? So 50% of 20. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this 50 and you're going to multiply it by the 20. All right. So you're going to take the 50 multiplied by the 20, but we still have this, right, fraction here. Remember, a fraction line represents division. So all of this then is going to be divided by the 100, right? 50 times by 20 equals 1,000 divided by 100. Now it's important to remember that when you're dividing a number, because we're not done yet, when you're dividing a number by 100, let's rewrite that down, 1,000, all right? There's always an invisible decimal point, right? Even though this is a whole number, there's no decimals, there is a decimal, and the decimal number is a 0, all right? We don't have to write it every time because this has no value, but there is one. So when we're dividing it by 100, there's 2 zeros, right? That indicates to me that I have to move 2 spaces, right, over to the left because I'm dividing. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it 1 space. That's 1. And I'm going to move it 2 spaces. Right? What's ever ahead of this is going to be my answer, right? Which is 10. So then 50% of 20 is going to equal 10. All right? So it doesn't matter if it's a problem or if it's just a word question. That's kind of how you solve it. Now, when I ask you to turn it from a percent to a fraction, as you can see, all you have to do is put it over 100 for a fraction. Then for a decimal, all you have to do is you do the same thing, right? So if I want 50%, as a fraction, we already know just put the 50 over top of 100. Now we have it as a fraction. This fraction, remember, fraction means division. So in order to find it as a decimal, I'm going to go 50. Same thing as I did up here. I have to move it 2 spaces over, right? So I have my invisible decimal, and I'm going to move it over 2 spaces. 1, 2. Decimal's right here, right? There has to be a 0 in front of this decimal. So we moved it over. This decimal is no longer here. It's right here. So our new number is 0.50, right? So that's how you can represent it. in all three forms. Try the homework today, watch the other Khan Academy video, and then if you have any other questions, let me know. Work on your Prodigy, all right? See you guys.